Hello and welcome into BTN's Take 10 podcast. This is Alex Roux of BTN.com, and we are back on the Take 10 podcast this week. Took a week off last week. Lost my voice a little bit after the Memorial Day weekend, so it would not have been a very fun-sounding interview. But I'm back, and the Take 10 podcast is back, and we've got a couple of great guests this week, especially if you're a Wisconsin Badgers fan. I think you'll really enjoy it, as we got a couple of Wisconsin Badgers from a couple of different eras of Badger hoops on the show this week. Our first discussion is with former Wisconsin forward Brian Butch. He played in the mid-2000s for Bo Ryan, played on some great Wisconsin teams. The first Wisconsin team, actually, to be ranked number one in the country. Pair of 30-win teams, and he had a very solid career for the Badgers after a McDonald's All-American high school career. So we catch up with him, talk to Butch about what he's been up to and his adventures in overseas ball as well during his post-Badger days. So that was a lot of fun. And then our second guest is from a more current era of Wisconsin basketball, and I say that like Butch's era was that long ago. It wasn't. But we got Duje Dukan from the two Final Four teams. He was a key reserve, a six-man of sorts for Wisconsin Badgers in 2014 and 2015 when they made those Final Fours, and his career, I believe, spanned 5 years at Wisconsin from 2010 to 2015. So some great insight from Dukan as well into those extremely fun and extremely successful Wisconsin basketball teams that feature the likes of Frank Kaminsky, Sam Decker, Nigel Hayes, Bronson Koenig, and of course Duje Dukan, who, as I said, played a key role in many of those games, especially his junior and senior years. So had a lot of great stories, especially if you are interested or know about some funny Bo Ryan stories. These guys had a couple for us that were hysterical, so definitely stay tuned for those. And we got some great stories about their teammates as well from those playing days. So a lot of fun for Wisconsin fans and Big Ten fans in general, because these are some very memorable teams they're talking about, and it was fun kind of going down memory lane with them. Even if you're not a Wisconsin fan, I think you'll enjoy the discussion. So stay tuned for that coming up in just a moment. First, a couple of reminders here on the Take 10 podcast. Be sure, if you haven't already, to subscribe to the Take 10 podcast. We're on iTunes, Google Play, and Podbean. And you can also subscribe now on YouTube. We're putting all the Take 10 podcasts on YouTube. And it's just another place where you can find the Take 10 podcast and conveniently stream it on your desktop, phone, wherever. Subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, or Podbean if you haven't already. One more reminder for the Take 10 podcast, we do have a promo code that is still active on the BTN.com online store. Get some shopping done on the BTN.com online store for Big Ten fans. You can get all kinds of Big Ten merch, swag, gear, all that good stuff. And you can get 10% off any order on the BTN.com online store with the promo code TAKE10. That's capital T-A-K-E, the number 1 and the number 0. Use that TAKE10 promo code to get 10% off your order through the Take 10 podcast. All right, so let's get to it now. A pair of interviews with a pair of Wisconsin Badgers, former Wisconsin Badgers, that both feature a lot of good stuff, a lot of fun insight, and we'll start it off with former Badger Brian Butch. And that interview with Mr. Butch starts right now. I'm very pleased to be joined by a former All-Big Ten player with the Wisconsin Badgers. He's currently an assistant coach with the Wisconsin Herd G League team. After playing a decade of pro ball, it's Brian Butch, and you can follow him on Twitter at Brian_Butch. What's up, Brian? Thanks for joining me.
Not much. Glad to be a part of it. Excited.
Yeah, absolutely. Good to have you on. And you are retired from playing in pro basketball, but you are still around the game. And as I mentioned, you're a coaching associate in the G League, and you do some sports talk as well. So fill me in on what you're up to these days in the world of sports.
Yeah, no, it's a fun time to be me. I got a lot of irons in the fire right now. But what I do in the summertime is we run a whole bunch of youth basketball camps in the state of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota. We'll be running about 75 to 80 of them this summer. All over, teaching the game that I love and being a part of it. So that's kind of the first part. I also run a talk show in Appleton, Wisconsin on 1570 The Score, and we talk everything from Brewers, Packers, Bucks, and obviously Badgers. And then the last thing, which I did last year, was my first year from playing, and I was an assistant coach for the Wisconsin Herd, the Milwaukee Bucks G League team. And obviously I know that league really well, played in it for 5 years, had a lot of success in that league. So it's always good to come back to that league and, be able to share the stories that I know and have, gone through with guys that are going through the same thing that I did. So really excited to be back in that environment and that arena as well, knowing kind of what I know and knowing that I can help the guys going through it.
Probably made it a little easier to hang it up as well, being around sports in the ways that you are, right?
Well, it did, and I was going back and forth last year if I was going to play or not. I was waiting for a great contract. I was kind of being really patient about it, playing as long as I have. There was no rush to get back to it. So ultimately, I had a couple of conversations with the GM, Dave Dean, and our head coach was a guy that I played at the same time, played against, and then played with him a little bit, and then he was actually my assistant coach my last year in Bakersfield. So I knew Jordan Brady a little bit prior to that. So I reached out to both those guys and said, yeah, we'd love to have you be a part of it. We'll give you some flexibility. If a great contract comes up, you can go play still. So I was doing everything to be in shape and be a part of it just in case I did get a phone call. And then ultimately just kind of decided about halfway through the season, this is what I really enjoy. I really, I'm feeling like I can really impact players and still be part of the game and wake up and my body feels a lot better than it normally did. So at that point, it was kind of, okay, let's do this and let's turn the page and move on to what's next.
All right, for sure. And a lot of Wisconsin fans listening obviously know all about your playing days. And then you played a decade of ball overseas and stateside in the G League, like we mentioned. And I definitely want to get to those stories here in a bit because those are always fun. But first, what I'd like to do is get into athletes' backgrounds and how they came up and kind of matriculated through college and then on throughout their careers. So first off, we have to talk about this McDonald's All-American game you were a part of because you were on the team in 2003. And as NBA fans know, that was a legendary class. So I'm just going to read some of the names here for those who don't. On your McDonald's All-American game team was LeBron James, or in the game itself. LeBron James, Chris Paul, Luol Deng, Charlie Villanueva, Shannon Brown, Chris Humphries, Kendrick Perkins, Aaron Brooks, and then there's more. And to me, that's just insane. So I'm sure you have some experiences and stories from that week and everything that led up to that game with those guys.
Well, and actually, the fun part about it is I played in the McDonald's game for a week, and then right away, about half of that group got on a plane and went to Chicago and ended up playing in the EA Sports Roundball Classic. So I had a solid about 2.5 weeks with these guys and got to know them on a personal level and just kind of understood how they ticked a little bit. And then we kind of all went on our journeys of what it was. And you end up crossing paths occasionally with them and understanding what they're doing. And you've got that kind of that brotherhood a little bit of knowing that you were one of the top 20 players in the country that year. So it's always been good. I've always seen those guys at different events and different things, and I've had a chance to cross paths and kind of say hello, what's up, and it's fun. It's something that really only 20 kids in the whole country get to experience that every year. So it's a really special thing to be a part of. And everyone was trying to find themselves out. Some guys were going to college. Some guys, as we know, by number 23 there, went right to the NBA and has had just an all right career, I'd say. So, but to see LeBron, the way he interacted in the All-American game and the way he did things was crazy because physically he was at a different level, but I also think mentally he was at a different level. The way he approached the All-Star game, he knew that was something special. Obviously, it was in Cleveland, his home. He wanted to put on a show, and he did. But you could just see the mental approach that he took in high school. Not many high school kids, and then even dealing with as many camps that I deal with now, you don't see that mental approach. It's something we talk about a lot at our camps. You don't see that mental approach, and LeBron's mental approach was so much above everybody else's. The Chris Pauls, the Kendrick Perkins, all those guys, they had great approaches. But LeBron was above all of those guys. And that's why he's had the success, in my opinion, that's why he's had the success that he's had so far, because he's had the physical tools, but I think mentally that's what separates him.
Yeah, and you read those names and you just see how many are out of basketball or have retired. And, it's nothing really against any of you guys because LeBron's superhuman, but it's really eye-opening to see him at the top of his game still, and that game being so long ago, really.
Well, it's actually, it's unbelievable. And then you watch game one and you see what he does. And I'm sitting on my couch thinking, wow, I played 10 years professionally. I thought that was a really good career. And then you see what he's done, and I'm in utter amazement because I just, knowing the road and the journey that I was on and where it went with numerous injuries and all of that stuff. I mean, LeBron hasn't had any serious injuries. He's stayed healthy. He's been able to continue at a high level. And then to do what he did in game 1 of the finals right away and put up 51 and it's just amazing at what he's done. And, I was very, very lucky to witness that at the beginning and now be able to witness it from afar. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's nuts. And we'll move on now. Focus a little more on your career. So coming out of that McDonald's All-American game, you went to Wisconsin, you stayed in your home state, and not many McDonald's All-Americans redshirt. You won't see that very often at all, but you did at Wisconsin. What went into that decision?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of it was I was 185 pounds trying to play in the Big Ten. For me, one of the reasons I was a McDonald's All-American was I was really skilled. I put a lot of time into my craft. I put a lot of time into becoming a good shooter. My footwork was good. All the stuff that a lot of great athletes don't necessarily have to do, I had to do. So I was really skilled, and people respect that. I could put the ball in the basket. I could stretch bigs out. Before that was really a huge thing. In 2003, the only bigs that really could stretch the floor were European bigs. It hadn't really come to American basketball. I was a little bit ahead of that curve. So it was a great thing. But again, everybody knows what the Big Ten is. It's a physical league. I was 185 pounds. I was getting thrown around like a wet noodle was. So going into that and having some conversations, I realized if I could go in and put some weight on, my redshirt year would not be a waste. And by the time I was a senior, I'd achieve everything that I needed to achieve. And ultimately, that's kind of how it played out. Obviously, we didn't get to a Final Four, win a national championship. Some guy by the name of Steph Curry was able to knock us off in the Sweet 16. So obviously that hurts a little bit. But if you were to tell me that he's doing what he's doing now, I probably could have lived with it a little bit better. But ultimately, I think that the decision was I knew I'd be a better player my senior year than I ever would and be able, help Wisconsin than my redshirt freshman year, just because I wasn't physically able to do it. And you're seeing that a little bit now with the guys like Nate Reavers, who's in there. I think if Nate would have been able to redshirt, I think you would have seen, and I still think you'll see great things from him. I really do. But you're seeing him out on the floor this past year, and you could see where physically he was outmanned. Not mentally, not basketball IQ wise, but just physically he was put in some really, really tough situations.
Yeah, and Wisconsin didn't really have the luxury of probably redshirting him this past year just with the personnel and the position they were in. But when you came in at kind of the end of the Devin Harris era, beginning of Alondo Tucker, right? So Bo kind of had the program up and running, right?
Yeah, for sure. So it was Devin Harris, but then we had some pretty good bigs now.
Right.
Mike Wilkinson was there. You had Zach Morley come in. So there were some guys that really could play at a high level ahead of me as well. And I think a guy like Mike Wilkinson just doesn't nearly get as much credit as he should. I mean, Mike was a heck of a basketball player for Wisconsin and was really kind of a huge catalyst in starting to win Big Ten championships there.
Absolutely. And I brought up Bo Ryan. Obviously, everyone knows he's one of the best coaches in Big Ten history, college basketball history. Whenever I interview Wisconsin players, I feel like there's always some funny stories about Bo. So do you have any favorite stories that come to mind about Bo, whether it's in the locker room or on the court or whenever?
Well, you're right about that. I think every Wisconsin player has a story about Bo, that's for sure. This is my go-to one, and I tell it to almost everybody that listens because to me it still amazes me. But it explains the type of person Coach is and why he's had so much success at Wisconsin. We always get on our planes and everywhere we go. And when you get on your bus, Coach always sits in the front of the bus. That's normal. Most coaches do everywhere since playing. That's where a lot of the coaches have sat. No big deal. But when we get on our plane rides, Coach doesn't sit in the front of the plane. Coach sits in the back of the plane. So, freshman year, I'm walking by. I think it's a little weird, but whatever, no big deal. Sophomore year, I walk by again, and all right, let it go. Don't say anything. Junior year, I still don't say anything. I'm thinking, okay, you got to let it be, Brian. Well, finally, I dislocate my elbow. We're number one in the country. We're playing Ohio State. Dislocate my elbow. I'm out for the year. My senior year is coming up, and I don't know if it was the pain medicine or what it was, but finally I go to Coach. Coach, got a question for you. Why in the world do you sit in the back of the plane? And he gets all serious with me. And I'm thinking, oh, this is wrong question. Come on, Brian. You should have waited at least till you're averaging a double-double or something before you bring this question up. However, he goes, Brian, have you ever seen a plane go down tail first? No. I go, Coach, well, there's your answer. Listen, if this plane's going down, I'm going to survive. It's going to go down nose first and that tail, and I'm going to survive. I looked at Coach. I said, Coach, I love you, man. But if this plane's going down, we're all going down. I don't care if I'm sitting in the front, middle, or back. But I think that story really – there's two reasons I like that story. One, it explains the way that he thinks. I mean, he was a survivor. He was a fighter, and he got every Wisconsin team to play that same way. We fought, we clawed, we did everything we needed to do to win games. And then we had that grit. And ultimately, I think that story explains who Bo Ryan is, but it also explains what Wisconsin basketball is.
That's great. And I love that you didn't work up the courage to ask him until like 3 or 4 years into your career. That's hilarious.
Well, exactly. Hey, listen, I know I needed to start, and I needed to make sure I was producing something before I went to him with a question. That's for sure.
That's awesome. All right, so how about you mentioned some of your teammates, even some of the unsung heroes, and we know a lot about a lot of the Wisconsin legends from those days. So how about stories from your teammates? And it could be, you spent quite a bit of time in Madison. It could be any of those years you were there. You have any favorite teammate stories you like to tell?
Well, I think that the best thing about what we did is there wasn't one guy. And I think you brought up names as Devin and Alondo Tucker and those guys. But I think what made Wisconsin such a special place is we all knew that no one would have success without the other guy. And the camaraderie that we had, the ability that we were able to each kind of put our own egos to the side for the betterment of each other so that we would ultimately have success as a team. I think that's what made all those guys special. But I really think a lot of it goes back to our preseason conditioning where we're running the hill, the famous hill that every Wisconsin fan knows about or has heard about, and I know it's got changed a little bit. But that was a mental grind, and the camaraderie that we would have was awesome. I mean, there are times that guys were running up and down that hill, and you'd see them take off running to the forest a little bit so that they'd throw up whatever they ate the day, too early or too late, whatever it might have been. I mean, there was times like that would constantly happen. And, a guy like Ray Nixon, I remember him taking off once. He comes back, he finishes up the hills, and that to me is what made all these moments special. I think, when you talk about getting together as a team, and you got a lot of characters in the locker room, especially in a basketball locker room. And I think we all found ways to mesh. We all found ways to work together. And that ultimately, I think, was some of the best times that we've had. I remember when we took a trip to Italy as a team going into our junior year, and then obviously we played really well that junior year and we're number one in the country. And you remember the Italy trip as far as just an opportunity to come together to play games that were somewhat meaningful, but just goof around at ice cream shops, go to the Coliseum, and everyone's eyes are looking different places and doing different things. And so you ask for one story, there's not one story. It's the camaraderie, it's what happens in the locker room. Those sorts of things are the stuff you remember the most. The stories, there's always something funny that happens every day almost. With as many characters that you have on a team, there's always a story. It's just a matter of what story is today. And then the next day, there's going to be something else. And the next day, it's somebody else doing something weird. So, but that's what made those teams so special.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned how strong that team aspect of your group was. But when you became an upperclassman and on those great Wisconsin teams, you kind of really came into your own as a player. You were honorable mention All Big Ten as a junior, first team All Big Ten as a senior, won 30 games both years. So I assume having that personal role and such a prominent role in the team had to be rewarding for you, especially coming up as such a highly regarded recruit.
Well, yeah, and I think what made that special was the process. And I know the process right now, that term is being overused. But for me, I understood that this wasn't going to be a one thing. I knew we talked about it. My redshirt year, I was going to have to put on 30 or 40 pounds. I mean, I did. I was about 235, 240. I put on 60 pounds. Okay, well, you don't just put on 60 pounds in a year and then have your body respond the way you want it to respond. I needed to kind of change my game a little bit, craft my game into my new body. So that was going to take a year. My freshman year, I thought I had, a pretty good freshman year. Was still trying to figure out what my body was and what I could do, couldn't do, what I should do, and then also understand what it meant to play Wisconsin basketball. I didn't play a whole lot of defense in high school. I didn't have to. I was 7 feet tall, and everybody else was about 6'3". So you just stand in the middle, you block shots, rebound, you're good to go. Well, I think every Wisconsin fan knows that's not going to cut it under Bill Ryan. So I needed to learn what it meant to play defense and how to play defense and positionally where I needed to be. All those little things that, people take for granted, I needed to kind of relearn a little bit. So that progress and that progression is really what I really enjoyed. I knew I needed to get better. I got better. And then when it was time to, play, I felt like I played at a pretty high level. And I thought I turned out to be a halfway decent basketball player. So that was the fun part. On a personal level, obviously, it's been broken, but my junior year, we had 30 wins. That was a school record. My senior year, we had 31 wins. That was a school record. So, to leave your last 2 years when you had a really big part of it and to have 61 wins in 2 years, that's the stuff I'm proud of as a team, because I think ultimately we all bought in. You see it all the time when college players leave college. Well, I could have done more. I had to fit into the system. And if any college player sits there and doesn't tell you that, they're probably lying to you. Ultimately, every college kid leaves a college program and says, oh, coach didn't let me do this, or I could have done this. But it's you buy in for the betterment of the program. That's what college basketball is. That's why there's so much success there. So ultimately, I think that's what the great part was. And, everyone bought into that and we won. And everyone sacrificed. And that right there is, again, I think what Wisconsin basketball is, sacrifice for the betterment of the program.
Yeah, and Bo had built that thing into a consistent winner, and Wisconsin had been very good for a long time by the time you got there. But as you mentioned, it was the first Wisconsin team to be ranked number 1 while you were there. So what was the vibe like around campus, around Madison, when the program kind of reached that pinnacle?
Yeah, and it's crazy that it's still, even with as good as the Final Four teams have been, they still weren't ranked number 1 in the country. So the vibe was great. I think ultimately it was a great place to be. The Kohl Center was rocking every single night we were there. And we really had a really, really good team. And I think, obviously a little biased, everyone's going to say when they listen to this, but and Coach Ryan has even hinted at it at times, but I think the team that we had my junior year was a Final Four team, if I don't dislocate my elbow, which is probably one of the nastier injuries out there. But it definitely derailed what we could do, and we go from being a team that's number 1 in the country to almost losing in the first round of the NCAA tournament to Texas A&M Corpus Christi. So that right there was a really, really tough thing to kind of overcome. For me, it was a tough thing mentally because I wanted to be out there playing, helping this team, go far, because we had the pieces. As a player, if you have the pieces to make it to a Final Four, to be a national championship caliber team, that. We had the pieces there. My senior year, I thought we had the pieces. I really thought our bracket set up really nice for us. I thought we were a better team my junior year. My senior year, I thought we did a really, really good job. We were really good. We would have definitely made a deep run. And like I said earlier, a guy by the name of Steph Curry came in and decided he was going to end that real quickly. But that being said, that Davidson team was more than Steph. They had some really good players on the team.
Yeah, definitely. I want to ask about that game in just a moment, but you brought up the unfortunate injury you suffered to your elbow, and just the thought of a dislocated elbow just kind of makes me squirm here, thinking, just hearing that term. So was it as uncomfortable and painful as it sounds?
Yeah, it was. That's all I got. I mean, it was everything. If you go to YouTube, you still can see it, which I'm not suggesting to do it, but everything you see, it is. That was one of the most I've had a couple of pretty severe injuries. That one ranks up there. Not as bad as my ruptured patella tendon, but that one right there was one of those where I ultimately didn't even realize what was going on. I went up to block a shot, and why? That's a great question. Everyone that's seen me play realizes that I am so not an athlete. So why was I trying to do that? Who knows? But I was, and all of a sudden I fall down, my elbow dislocates, it pops out, it's where it should not be, and before I know it, I'm on the bench trying to walk over there, and they put my elbow right back into place. But I knew that was, I had no idea what a dislocated elbow was all about, what it entailed. I asked our trainer, I said, hey, can I go back in the game? I thought it was like a dislocated finger. You just put it back into place, you're good to go. He goes, go back in the game? He goes, you're lucky if you're playing again this season. So I said, oh, it's like that. And then thankfully I got some pain meds and was able to get on the plane and start feeling pretty good about myself and about life after those pain meds headed. But I'll tell you, it took a while. That was a pretty rough injury. There's no question about that.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna take a pass on YouTubing it, but maybe some adventurous listeners will go ahead and do that. All right, so you're able to come back from your elbow injury, and then your senior year you ran into Steph Curry and Davidson on kind of the run that put him on the map and that school on the map. And he was on fire, like you said. So can you just describe playing against Steph Curry, game planning for him, and how similar his game was at that stage of his career to now as the MVP caliber player that he is?
Yeah, and ultimately was his game hasn't changed a whole lot. I mean, he was able to run the show at Davidson, and rightfully so. I would say I think the one thing that he's probably gotten a little bit better at is moving off of the basketball, giving it up, getting it back type deal. Obviously, in college, you're running a lot more sets. I think in the NBA, you've got a lot more freedom of movement. So I think that's probably where you see, or at least I see a biggest difference versus when we played against him. But, I mean, the kid was a shooter. And as we prepared, our point guard, Trayvon, was able to play in our last game, but he turned his ankle. And he had all week to rehab, and we really thought he was going to be able to match up. That was going to put Mike Flowers. Trayvon was going to be able to guard Richards. Mike was going to be able to guard Steph, and we were going to be able to help where we needed help, and it was going to be great. We were going to have Jason Bohannon come off the bench. We were going to be set. We felt good about the matchups. Well, a little bit before the game, Trayvon, said he turned his ankle a little bit, couldn't really go. So at that point, what we had kind of planned for and how, that was going to happen really got turned a little bit. J-Bo had to step in, play a lot more. Mike had to switch over and guard the point guard Richards a little bit. Then he had to guard Steph a little bit. So there was a lot more stress put on what Mike had to do. And then at the back part, the bigs, we were just trying to communicate all the screening action that they were running and all the stuff they were trying to do to get Steph open. So ultimately, I think when you look at it, you talk about everything's got to be in the right situation. I think if Trayvon doesn't get hurt, I think it's a different game. But he does, and that's how that's how it unfolded for us. I thought, not that I ever looked ahead in that, but I thought we matched up. We probably would have played Kansas, and I thought we matched up a lot better with Kansas because they had a big, strong front line with Sasha Khan and those sorts of players. But we never got them. So I think ultimately a little turn of an ankle, I think, changed our fate more than Steph being really, really hot, because I think we could have put a lot of pressure on him and made him feel uncomfortable. And then you did see that next game from Kansas. They put pressure on Steph. Steph still put together a performance, but they made him work a lot more, and because they just had more bodies to put on him.
Yeah, and Curry had 33 in that game against you guys, and your career at Wisconsin came to an end, but continued on as a professional and overseas and here as well in the G League. And these stories are always the ones that I kind of like getting into the most, especially when I have former basketball players on the podcast, because there's always some crazy stories. It's honestly like one of my favorite parts is getting into all the shenanigans that go on overseas. So just from your Wikipedia page and your bio and all that, it looks like you played in Japan, Greece, China, Puerto Rico, Philippines. Am I leaving any countries out? Where else did you play?
So the last 2 years I actually played in Japan. I played in a small town called Fukuoka, and then I also played in Tokyo with Toshiba. I actually won championships my last 2 years playing. So it was really a great experience. I loved it. Probably my favorite. I also played in Dubai. Probably my favorite place would probably have been, that's a really good, and I would probably have to go with Dubai because of the life and the lifestyle and the way was fantastic. Now the basketball is getting better, but it's still not at the level that I was used to playing, but it's getting better. The guys are doing a great job of doing what they need to do. I also love Tokyo. I mean, I'll tell you one thing, a 7-footer on a train in Tokyo, Japan. Now that's something you got to see, because everybody came up to about my belly button. So I could see everybody's head, that's for sure. But the way culturally Japan is, I absolutely loved it. I mean, people are so respectful. They follow the rules. All those little things that sometimes we take for granted, they do it to a T over there. So culturally, it was amazing to be a part of that.
And stories that come out of overseas ball, there's always, I feel like, some shady dealings in certain places. So were there any stints that you had that were kind of ruined or cut short by anything, any kind of sketchiness, I guess?
Oh, there's no question about it. And you hear that Greece has the problem a lot. And I went there and was playing really well, and had a double-double, and thought everything was going the way I expected it to go. And before I knew it, they decided they were going to go in a different direction. They brought in another guy. He started practicing with us. Listen, my Wisconsin education was really, really good. So I understood that if they brought in another guy, it was probably to take my job. So I just wanted to make sure I was going to get my money. Not a big deal. Probably send me home, and that's fine. We'll figure it out. Well, I didn't get paid for the first month, and they still had another guy there. So when the guy was there, it was a month long he was there, kind of as a tryout basis, whatever it is. I never got paid. So finally, they decide they're going to kind of make a change. Not a big deal. I knew it was coming. Me and my agent, we'd already planned on something else, and that's just kind of the way this industry works. So I walk in, I'm like, I need my money first. They're like, no, we have your plane ticket, but they're short almost a month and a half of pay. So I buy a ticket, I go to the game, and I walk in because the general manager and the owner are avoiding my calls. They're avoiding any time that we've set up a chance to meet. Everything they're avoiding. So I know there's one place that I know I'm going to find them, and that's at the game. So I buy a ticket, I show up, and then I walk into the locker room where the GM and the owner are. And I'm like, listen, guys, I need my money, and I need it now. And then I'll get on a plane and I'll leave. But this whole thing not paying me isn't going to cut it. And I go, I'm going to buy a ticket, and I'm going to show up to every game until I get paid. So needless to say, the next day there was money in my bank account, and I was able to get on a plane, went to Bakersfield, and within 4 months later, I had signed an NBA deal with the Denver Nuggets. So let's just say it worked out well, but that was one of many, many situations where you just kind of shake your head at it and realize that this is what international basketball is. You got to have a voice. If you don't have a voice, they'll just walk over you.
That's hilarious. And I guess that kind of goes into the whole culture shock, or falls under that category of international basketball, like you said. Were there any other big culture shocks for you personally? Because you alluded to it earlier, Tokyo and Dubai are a world away from Appleton and even Madison, Wisconsin. So what was kind of a shock to the system besides what you've already mentioned overseas?
Well, I think the first couple of years overseas, I started in Spain for a little bit, and there was a miscommunication between my agent and the team. Now, what you believe on that, who knows? All I'm going to say on that is I fired my agent from Spain because I thought I was going over there for a 10-month deal, and it was a tryout. So needless to say, I was on Skype letting my agent go, hiring a new agent ready to kind of attack it. So I had a quick kind of culture change to Spain, but then that got changed really quickly. Then I went to China, and that was by far the eye-opening experience to what professional basketball was going to be for me. I had a translator by the name of Eagle, and he ultimately was a guy that knew some English but not nearly enough English to actually communicate with me. So anytime I would order food, anytime I would ask, I always said, is it live? Is it live? Whether it was a chicken or fish, because they brought out so much different food in China that just would not work for me. And then I tried almost everything, but I would know some stuff just wasn't going to cut it. Then I had to ask, and obviously dog is a delicacy over there. So I'd always ask Eagle as well, hey, is this dog? Is this dog? Is this dog? Because that was one thing I was never going to try. And every time I asked him, he would laugh. So unfortunately, I probably did have some dog, and just I couldn't believe it. And even as I say this story, it's amazing. But so that was then I knew, okay, I got to be full on all the time. You can trust some of your interpreters, but you got to really, really dive through this and break down some stuff.
All right.
So that was a great thing. And then, obviously after that, got let go about 6 weeks into it. And then I ended up in Germany. And that's when I actually got really close with a German family, and they kind of took me under their wings a little bit. And I was able to learn what professional basketball was, what I needed to do, how to go about it. So that kind of was my learning point as far as what I needed to do culturally. And everywhere since, I've embraced it. Everywhere I've been. In Dubai, I had the traditional Muslim gear, from the dress and the clothing that they wore. Tokyo, I would try all the food. When I was in the Philippines, there was something called boyat, which is kind of a half born like chicken egg. And I ate that because all my teammates were eating it. So from that moment in Germany, I really realized you got to embrace the culture that you're in, no matter where you're at. Embrace it, enjoy it, become part of it, and you're going to get a lot farther with your teammates and your coaching staff. And so that was a great learning experience for me.
Yeah, that's the good stuff. Those are the stories I love hearing about overseas hoops. So definitely enjoyed that. And we talked about it. You are a coaching associate for the Wisconsin Herd. You played a good amount in the former D League, now known as the G League. So if you kind of compare those experiences here in the United States to overseas basketball, I'd definitely be interested to hear the differences and some similarities as well.
Yeah, so I think when you look at what the G League and D League / G League is, it is by far, I don't want to say more professional because that's not the right word, but it's smoother, right? Because it's what you're used to. It's what America's used to. It's what you grew up in America. You're used to being able to get on planes and and read where you're going and how to handle airports and all those little things. So the basketball side of it is the same as well. The language, there's not a language difference. There's all those things. So it's a really easy transition to the G League. The one thing that makes the G League very, very hard is there are a ton of ups and downs. You might play really, really well. You might be close to a call-up, and then you'll get a call from your agent and say, oh, they took somebody else. You're off that team's list for now. We'll see, but probably nothing's going to happen. So there's that constant up and down, up and down, up and down. There's the back-to-backs that you've got to play. There's the long bus rides that you've got to play. Now they've gotten rid of some of those long bus rides, but there's still a couple of them, and you still got to perform. You might play in Canton, Ohio one day and then have to bus to Fort Wayne the next through the night, and then you got to go perform. So ultimately, overseas, there's not as many ups and downs because I would say every day is a roller coaster there. You know that every day something's going to change, something's going to happen overseas. There's going to be a curveball. All of that happens overseas. You know every day something weird is going to happen. In the G League, there's consistency. The ups and downs come from you as a player because the league is so very competitive. So I think that's the toughest thing with that league is you've got to be mentally locked in on each day and try to cut back on the ups and downs that are caused a lot by yourself. Sure.
And Brian, listen, you've been very generous with your time, but I do want to talk some current Wisconsin basketball before I let you go. Obviously, this past year under Greg Gard was a step back for the program, not making the tournament for the first time in a long time. But I think overall, especially seeing how they performed at the end of the season, Wisconsin fans are still generally optimistic. So I want to get your take on the current state of the Badger program and what you foresee for Wisconsin under Greg Gard.
Well, I think the sky's the limit for this upcoming year. I think you got a lot of valuable experience last year, and your young kids did. But you had so many injuries. I mean, you had Kobe King go down with an ACL. You had Demetric Trice get hurt. You had Brad Davison play with one arm. A guy like Nate Reavers was going to redshirt. Now got a valuable year of playing and kind of, got tossed around a little bit. But that's only going to help this summer as he progresses through everything, through the weights, and is going to understand the value of all that. And then you look at some of the recruits that they've got, and then you obviously bring back Ethan Happ, who, was testing the NBA waters and decided to come back. I don't think there's a lot of teams in the Big Ten that want to play this Wisconsin team this upcoming year. I think they're going to be really, really good. I think, Coach Gard's leadership is perfect for what the Wisconsin Badgers is about. It is a team that wants to work, wants to improve. They're going to defend. They're going to take care of the basketball, and they're going to be in every game. And there's a reason Coach Ryan has had so much success. And then obviously Coach Gard, being under Coach Ryan for as long as he has been, he understands what the blueprint was. Now, has Coach Gard done a great job of changing some of those things up and doing some things differently? Yeah, I think you've seen the pace of play increase a little bit. I think Coach Gard has given some of the players a little bit more freedom in different areas. He's brought them back in at times as well in different areas. So I think there's been a really good balance there, because ultimately you've still got to get some of these players to play for you. And I think Coach Gard is doing a great job of that. So I think ultimately when you look at what next year is going to be for this Wisconsin basketball team, I think it's going to be a great year. I think you're getting a lot of guys back with a lot of valuable experience. And I think the limit is way out there. I think they've got a great opportunity to take advantage of this year as a learning experience. I don't think that we're going to have to talk about consecutive years of not making the NCAA tournament. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, you have a great point. You look across the Big Ten, a lot of Big Ten teams lost a lot. That's not the case for Wisconsin, and they're getting additions with just people coming back from injuries. So I expect them to take a big step forward from last season. I definitely agree. Brian, that's all I got for you this afternoon. I really appreciate you taking the time, jumping on. A lot of good stuff, a lot of good stories, and I'm sure Wisconsin fans enjoyed hearing them as much as I did. So I really appreciate it.
Oh, no, it was great. I'm glad to have me on again. We got stories up the wazoo, I'll tell you that. They are full of them, from overseas to just what it is, just the times at Madison. All of them have been great. I appreciate your time today. It was awesome.
All right, we'd love to. Thanks again.
All right.
All right, thanks once again to Brian for joining me. A lot of good stuff from him. Really enjoyed chopping it up with him. We'll definitely get him back on the podcast, maybe in basketball season once Badger basketball gets back underway, and he can give us some insight since he is a member of the media, the sports talk radio media, and obviously very good at articulating his thoughts and telling some good stories while he's at it. All right, we'll fast forward a little bit in Badger basketball history to the Duje Dukan era, the era of para Final Fours, Big Ten championship, back-to-back 30-win seasons, and very fond memories for a ton of Badger fans. We'll get into his insight right now on the Take 10 podcast. It's former Wisconsin forward Duje Dukan. I'm very pleased to welcome in another former Wisconsin Hooper. He was a 4-year player for the Badgers, played in 2 Final Fours, and is now playing professionally here in the U.S. It's Duje Dukan, and you can follow him on Twitter at Duje Dukan. Duje, what's up, man?
How you doing, man? Thanks for having me.
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming on. And I want you to start, if you could, by taking us through what you've been up to since your last game at Wisconsin. That was the national championship game back in 2015. Where has your professional journey taken you since then?
Yeah, so I ended up playing summer league with the Kings right out of Wisconsin. Ended up getting signed by them. Played my whole rookie year with them. Was up and down with the D-League and stuff on assignment. And then my second year, I went overseas to Croatia, played there for about 4 to 5 months, and then came back to the D-League, played in Chicago, and then this past season did the same thing and finished off in Fort Wayne in Indiana.
Yeah, and you mentioned right out of school you got the opportunity with the Kings. How did that come about? Because, I mean, you were a contributor for sure, especially on that team that reached the national title game, but you didn't have the draft prospects that someone like a Kaminsky or a Decker would have. So how did that opportunity come about?
Yeah, you know what? I just think sometimes in the position that you're at in college, you got to make a sacrifice for the benefit of the team, and I think that was my situation. I just wanted to bring whatever I could to the table. My role was being that 6th, 7th man, bringing the energy and kind of depending on the flow of the game, contributing in any way possible. And I think, once I left Wisconsin, I was kind of able to show more what I could do, if that makes sense. A little bit more freedom and free flow to my game. And, I had a pre-draft workout with the Kings, and, they like what they saw. Coach Carl wanted to see me kind of up close, and they ended up inviting me for Summer League. And that's kind of, after like 2 or 3 games, they ended up calling my agent saying, we want to sign him for the season. And then that was kind of it from there.
So when you were on the Sacramento Kings, in interviews that you gave, both during that time and afterwards, you mentioned a big influential figure for you was Rajon Rondo, who was on the Kings at that time. Can you get into your relationship with him and what kind of presence he had on that team?
Yeah, he was unbelievable, man. By far one of my favorite teammates I've ever had. You talk about a guy who's been in the league for so long, and I think he's like the epitome of somebody who was misunderstood. Just in the sense that, he had that situation with the Mavs where he wasn't playing a lot. People weren't happy with him. They weren't playing well. And I think, once he finally ended up leaving there, he ended up kind of being able to bring his true self out in Sacramento. And I think, for me personally, I didn't know what to expect. It's different. I grew up around the NBA, but when you're actually in it playing, it's a whole different story. So, I was kind of just picking his brain, learning from him on a day-to-day basis. And the one thing, that really surprised me about it is, whenever I went to the gym, he was always there. And, he was always bringing me into drills saying, do you get this? Do you get this? He's like, I want to make sure you know the offense, so if you get in games, you know what's going on. Or when we're playing in practice, he's like, I want you to be up to speed and everything. And he always made sure that, even guys who weren't playing or didn't have a big role on the team at that point, he wanted them still being involved. And it was actually kind of funny because before he came to Chicago, my dad being in the front office kind of just asked me about it. And I always told him from day one that I absolutely loved him. And then Gar Foreman kind of asked me the same thing. He's like, what'd you think of him? I was like, that was one of my favorite teammates by far. And then ironically enough, he ended up signing with Chicago after that.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah, so I mean, as far as Rondo's concerned, I couldn't be happier, especially the playoffs that he had this past year. I was really happy for him.
So what did you learn during your stint in the NBA? Just I guess about the game in general, because even if you're there for as long as you were a season, I feel like there's a lot you can pick up on. You mentioned everything that Rondo did for you. What did you learn in general during that experience?
Well, you know what? There was a lot of different things that I picked up on, but I think just the number one thing is just picking these guys' brain as to how to stay in the league. Because so many guys have that 1 year stint or 2 year stint, or they whether it's like they have a couple call ups and never have the opportunity to stick. So I think it's kind of that mentality of realizing it's a marathon and not a sprint. I think that's the number one thing, but also knowing what you can do and not kind of adjusting to the team, if that makes sense. So, for example, if you're a low post presence, work on that and master your craft. Don't kind of work outside the box. A lot of times guys who are shooters, they'll want to work on their ball handling and, become great ball handlers. But instead, they should be working on, perfecting the shot and making that like one thing that they're great at. Because when you look at the NBA now, there's so many guys who are in the league just because of one thing. You look at guys like, for example, Korver. That man can shoot the ball with the best of them. But then you have guys like, Andre Roberson, who's strictly a defender. But that's how you get paid. Guys get paid for being masters at their craft, and I think that's one thing that I've kind of taken an initiative on the last couple seasons. This past season I ended up having surgery on my knee finally, so it's the first time in 2 years that I'm actually healthy. So I'm super excited for this upcoming season. To finally playing free and having fun again. Yeah.
So you mentioned you just came from a workout today. What are your prospects now going forward now that you're healthy? Where do you where are you planning to play next season? And I assume NBA is still the ultimate dream, and I assume you got a lot left in the tank because you're still relatively young.
Yeah, I'm just kind of taking it day by day, letting my agent kind of handle that stuff. I'm just, trying to be the best player that I can be. I'm working hard every day out here in LA with a great group of guys, a great trainer, and put myself hopefully in a good situation to get a good contract next season, whether that is the NBA or overseas somewhere. Ideally, yeah, I'd love to stay here. In the NBA, and I think if I get the right opportunity or any opportunity, I think I can, show that I belong. And I would definitely be excited for that. So kind of just taking it day by day, enjoying the process, and waiting to see what happens.
For sure. And you mentioned your Bulls connections. Not only did you play for the Bulls G League squad, your dad, you mentioned, is an employee of the Bulls front office. He's a director of international scouting for them. So since he's been in that position for a long time, I imagine you've been around that franchise and gotten really close with that franchise over the years. Can you kind of describe growing up around the Chicago Bulls, what that was like?
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. I don't think I really understood what that was like until I got to, high school and college. When I kind of shared my story with some of my teammates, and they're like, wait, you rebounded for MJ? Like, you were around there when he practiced? I was like, yeah, it was kind of like a no-brainer type, not a big deal to me, because it was something that I did every day. It was like, I had breakfast and I would go to the gym with my dad and watch practice. And so, I grew up around the game, grew up around those guys. So it was kind of just like second nature. It wasn't anything crazy. And, I realized obviously when I got older, like how unbelievable those years were and how unbelievable some of those guys on that team were. And what a true honor it was to, see these guys behind the scenes, how much work they put in. And then obviously see all that work, come to fruition with all the championships that they were fortunate to win. And then obviously, I saw the down years with the Bulls, the baby Bulls, where they had, Tyson Chandler, Eddie Curry, all the young guys, and the process of, rebuilding and getting back to playoff contention with guys like Derrick Rose, Jimmy Butler, Joakim Noah, and that squad. And now, they're kind of doing the same thing again with the likes of, Chris Dunn, Zach LaVine, and Larry Markkinen. So it's kind of coming full circle again.
Yeah, what's your most vivid memory from, I guess, as a kid, just being around those '90s Bulls and that dynasty?
There's a lot of them, honestly. I think probably the coolest one would be back in, I think it was 97. There's a picture that I have at home. We were in the locker room celebrating after they won the game. And there's a picture of Scotty trying to pour champagne on me and my dad, and I'm grabbing the bottle, trying to prevent him from tossing it on me. And I was 6 years old at the time, in my dad's arms. And that's obviously something I'll never forget. And the goal is now to be able to kind of switch it up and put myself in his shoes and be able to celebrate it one day.
That's awesome, man. So you grow up in the Chicagoland area. Your start Deerfield High School, and then you get to Wisconsin in the same class as guys like Ben Bruss, Josh Gosser in that 2010 class. So you kind of described the struggle maybe to stand out on those teams early on in a program that pretty much had it rolling already for a number of years and just had good class after good class coming in.
Yeah, obviously it was tough. I think every kind of college recruit can attest to it. You get said some things during the recruiting process to kind of, entice you to come. And then when you get there, you realize, it might not be as sweet as it sounds. But at the same time, it's not like, you're promised to play 30 minutes a game coming in or anything like that. But, I was told, obviously, that they really liked me, that I'd be a good fit. And unfortunately, for my personal situation, I didn't really get a chance until my junior year. And so, I knew whenever that time came, whenever my opportunity came, I had to take advantage of it. And fortunately for me, once that time came, my number was called, I was ready. But as far as, teammates that I've had, I think, especially my senior year, that was like a group of guys that, I've never had a bond with like that. We were so close together. Guys were so unselfish, didn't care, who was getting the credit. Yeah, we did have Frank, who was National Player of the Year, but there was nights where Frank didn't play well. And I stepped up, or Nigel stepped up, or Sam stepped up. That was, I think, the beauty of that 2014, 2015 team is, on any given night, anybody could explode for having a big night. And unfortunately, obviously, our dreams were cut short a little bit in that national title game. But, I think the bond that we have is something that we'll definitely hold on to for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, you guys accomplished a ton, back-to-back 30-win seasons, Final Fours, all that good stuff. So coming up, when did you kind of realize how special that group was going to be? Because you kind of see, the veterans were still there, but you had guys like Bronson and Nigel coming up. Kaminsky and Decker, you could tell, were special, and you, Gosser, Brust, and Jackson, those guys were kind of the old vets. So when did you really realize that, hey, you guys might have something cooking here?
I think at that point, the turning point for us would have been the tournament my junior year, so the 2013-2014 tournament. Making that run to the Final Four, I think, a lot of people were like, oh, that was a fluke, like Wisconsin got lucky. But I think that kind of convinced us, our goal going into that season was, to break the mold. Wisconsin always had the idea of, let's get to the tournament, like let's, win the first weekend, and then, that's good enough. But we're like, nah, we're not going to do that. We're breaking out of that mold. Like we can accomplish better. We can go bigger than that. And we always talked about, Final Four. And then our junior year, we ended up doing it. And then I think, obviously, the way that we lost that Kentucky game, it was huge motivation for everybody going into the offseason. We remembered that feeling. We were sick to our stomach, being that close and getting it ripped away. We were, motivated to put in that work so that once the opportunity presented itself again, that it wouldn't happen the way it did before. So I think once my senior year rolled around, guys were locked in and ready to go. And I think once those big games came, we were already battle tested and stuff like that. So we were ready to go when the time came. And we were just kind of out there to prove it to everybody else that, Wisconsin wasn't like a one-hit wonder with the tournament. We were here to stay. We were good enough. And it was a nice nightly thing that we wanted to prove.
Yeah, and when you watch like a documentary like the Fab Five and teams that have gone to back-to-back Final Fours, some people talk about the pressure and the challenge of getting back and how that can kind of hang over a season. Once you had gotten there, what was the, I guess, attitude like in your locker room? Did you guys feel any pressure the second time around, or was it more business-like?
Honestly, no. It was way more business-like. It was almost like an expectation for us. We set goals at the beginning of the season. We're like, all right, you look at the team that we had last year. We went to the Final Four. Now this year, everybody's a year older. We're better. We're smarter. We've been through it. We know what to expect. There's absolutely no reason we can't go farther. And I think, there wasn't that, your first time around, you're going to have nerves, jitters, you don't know really what to expect. Second time around, we're like, we've been through this. There's nothing that can scare us, that we're afraid of, that we don't know how to handle. We're fine. And I think, I think for me personally, with how many upsets happened that first weekend, my senior year, once we got past Coastal Carolina, that was kind of the game that, they were definitely underranked being a 16 seed. I think they should have been higher than that. But I think, once we won that game, it was kind of getting the monkey off our back. Like, all right, we're not getting upset. Just relax, go out there and play. And we obviously had our fair share of tough games down the stretch, with that North Carolina game, with the Arizona game, and then obviously with the Kentucky game going down to the wire. But I think, all the games that we had during the season and the year before kind of helped prepare us for that long road of the 2014-2015 Final Four run.
Definitely. So how about the experience of the Final Four itself? Like, it's such an event, and there's so much you have to focus on besides the game itself once you get there, with like media obligations and fans and being in a different city for an entire weekend. If you could compare and contrast, I guess, the 2014 Final Four to the 2015 one, once you guys had kind of been through the ringer once, and the overall experience of just the event itself?
Sure. I think 2014 in Dallas, it was kind of I think for me personally, for most of the guys on the team, it was like we were little kids in a candy store. We were just eating up every minute of it, loving it, enjoying the spotlight, enjoying being on that stage, all the media obligations, and kind of just having fun with it. But the second time around, it was like, all right, we got media again today. Like, let's get this over with. Let's get back to the hotel. Guys were just kind of locked in. We were ready to go. We weren't concerned about any of the hoopla around the game. We were just focused on, all right, Kentucky's on Saturday night. We beat Kentucky. We're playing for a national championship on Monday. And that was kind of it. Like, the first time around, it was, enjoy the process and have fun. But the second time around, we're like, we're not here for the hoopla and all that. We're here to win games and win a national championship. But I think, obviously with Dallas, I think that was the weekend that we set the record for most people to ever attend a basketball game in the history, with like 77,000 something, or 79,000, excuse me. So, to think that we were part of history for an event like that, it's crazy to think about. But I think, as we kind of talked about earlier, that second year we were just way more locked in, way more business-like, and we were kind of just ready to go. All that extra stuff that was going on, we left that to the media and for the other teams. We didn't really want to get caught up into that, even though I think people are going to say, oh, well, look at all the press conferences and stuff like that. That's just us being us. We were a fun group. We liked to joke around with each other. It was the bond that we had. So while we were like, taking care of all those obligations, we're like, why not just have fun with it? So that's kind of where like guys started to clown around during some press conferences and stuff like that, and that garnered more attention from the media.
Yeah, one similarity between those Final Fours was you played Kentucky. Obviously, you guys lost in 2014, and then 2015, that Kentucky team, squares up with you guys, and they're 38-0. That's the team with the platoons or whatever, and they seemed unbeatable. People were talking about 40-0 all season, and you guys take them down. What was, I guess, the game plan for that game? Were you guys intimidated at all? Just what was that, facing that challenge and going out there and getting it done? What went into that accomplishment itself?
You know what? Honestly, I don't think we were intimidated because we wanted Kentucky from the jump. After losing to them the way that we did the season prior, we didn't care. They have Karl-Anthony Towns, they have Devin Booker, all these guys who are, doing unbelievable things in the NBA. We didn't really care about, how they were highly touted and all that. We were just like, we want Kentucky. Like, they beat us, we want them. And I remember, as soon as we beat Arizona, we got back on the bus and we were watching the end of the Notre Dame-Kentucky game on our phones, hoping that Kentucky would pull it out so we could play Kentucky. And, when they won, everybody was excited because we got the matchup that we wanted. But I think when it came to it, the one big thing that we really keyed in on is their size. Because when you look at that front line, they were big. People always joked about our Redwood lineup at Wisconsin. When we put Trey at the 1, Sam at the 2, me at the 3, Nigel at the 4, Frank at the 5. That was considered like a big lineup. But then they have, Trey Lyles, who's like 6'10", 6'11", playing their 3. They have Karl Towns playing their 4, Willie Cauley-Stein playing their 4, and Karl Towns playing their 5. So, I mean, they went huge. So that was one thing that we really needed to account for was, like, obviously the rebounding. But then they also had some shooters with the Harrison twins, Ulis, and Booker. So I think, once the game got underway, we were kind of just like, at the end of the day, it's basketball. We just need to play our game. And if we take care of that, I think we'll put ourselves in a good position to win.
All right, so you guys fell one game short, lost to Duke in the national championship game, but you guys are remembered probably as the best team in Wisconsin history, most wins in Wisconsin history with 36. And what really stood out about that group was just how much fun you guys had, and you alluded to it earlier. Like, I remember video games being a big thing with you guys. Like, the press conferences were funny to watch. People kind of grew into their personalities as that team and that group evolved. So what was that group like, just being a part of it throughout those 4 or 5 years?
Man, it's crazy. It's funny you say that because we had Frank's jersey retirement back in February, and pretty much the whole team was back together, aside from I think one or two guys who weren't able to make the trip. And I kid you not, it was literally like we didn't skip a beat. We didn't see each other for, 2 years basically. This was like the first time that the whole team was back. And it was literally like we're making the same jokes, catching up on stuff, cracking inside jokes. And we were joking about it. We were saying how we need to do this way more often. Because we had so much fun, just rekindling old stuff that we've been through. But as far as, having fun with that group, it was something that we'll never forget. I think the bond that we were able to have off the court, going to eat together, playing video games all the time, and all that stuff, that relationship that we established led to all the chemistry that we had on the court. And, like you said, unfortunately, that goal ended up falling short a little bit. But I think once you look at the bigger picture, people begin to realize, that we put Wisconsin on the map, and we're able to, hopefully show that, we can be a force to be reckoned with for years to come.
Yeah, no question. And I'm glad you brought up Kaminsky's retirement ceremony this past year, because when Frank came into college, he wasn't really highly recruited, and he certainly was not a projected AP Player of the Year and lottery pick type guy. So when did you kind of think that Frank Kaminsky could turn into the caliber of player where one day you hang his jersey in the rafters at Kohl Center?
I would probably say the summer going into junior year. You always saw flashes of it. They had high potential, but we weren't really sure what he could do until that going in our junior year when he really lost a lot of weight, came back with a lot of motivation because we knew, Jared Bergen wasn't on the team anymore, and it would kind of be Frank's job to lose. And I think he kind of took that opportunity and ran with it. And he wanted to kind of break the role of, the classic Wisconsin big man, shooting threes here and there, but, being more so like an inside presence. But Frank took that to a whole nother level, putting the ball on the floor, showing off his handle, backing guys down, shooting threes, leading the break. That's kind of where the transformation began. And I think that's where our team began to transform because, Coach Ryan realized, I've never really had a player like this before. And then he gave a lot of other guys freedom too. And that's what kind of led to us beginning to flourish into what we became.
All right, Duje. Well, we talked a lot about the players and your teammates and yourself during your time in Wisconsin. We haven't talked much about Bo Ryan, though, and I feel like Bo Ryan's always good for a story, and his players always have good stories about him. So do you have any Bo Ryan stories that stick out on the top of your head when you think back?
Yeah, we got. Okay, so here's one. I'm convinced we weren't able to realize if Coach was messing around about it or he genuinely just messed up people's names all the time. So it was going into my sophomore year. Yeah, it was my sophomore year because Frank was a freshman, and we were playing at Indiana. And we're going over the scouting report. He was kind of giving his pregame speech. We were talking, and he's like, guys, we want to make sure whoever's guarding Opapipo got to be locked in. And everybody looks around. We're like, what? Did he just say Opapipo? And everybody's like, and I lifted my shirt above my head, above my mouth, so I could start laughing. And then one of the assistant coaches is like, Coach, it's Oladipo. He goes, yeah, that's what I meant. And so anyway, that started a trend where he mispronounced. We literally had a wall. So in our locker room, we had one of those whiteboards that you can move. And behind one of them, we just put down all the names that he mispronounced. And then we would put what the actual name should have been. And we kid you not, we filled up an entire board of mispronunciations. So that's one thing that I think definitely stuck in my mind from Coach Ryan.
To this day, you don't know if he was messing with you guys or not?
We don't know. We were once it kind of at some point it kind of got out of hand as far as like the mistakes he was making, and so we were like, I think he kind of embraced it because he realized like how much fun we were having with it, and he's like, yeah, why not? Let's just keep it going.
Or do you guys have like any record of this whiteboard anywhere still? Like, somebody take a picture of it, please. Tell me there's a picture somewhere.
No, unfortunately we don't. I'm trying to think if anybody ever took a picture of it. We just kind of added to it, and nobody ever like took a picture of it or anything. I think they wiped it off at the end of the season.
Well, that's great, because I feel like it's just an old guy thing. Like, my grandpa mispronounces names all the time, and I can't tell if he like really knows the real name and is just like giving up on trying to pronounce it or what. But that's totally relatable.
Exactly.
And one more story. So I talked to Brian Butch earlier today for this podcast, and he told me a Bo story, and I want to see if it sounds familiar and if you notice the same thing. So he said that on Wisconsin's team bus that Coach Ryan always sat in the front of the bus, but on the plane he would always sit in the back. And eventually Brian worked up the courage to ask Coach Ryan, like, why do you sit in the back of the bus? What's the deal? And he said because if the plane crashed, it would go down nose first, and he would survive in the back. Like, does that sound? Did you know that?
Yeah, we did know that. It's a very, very strange outlook. We found that out. I can't remember when it was. I think it was like when we took like a small charter to, I think, Penn State or somewhere, and when we were flying, guys were always trying to maneuver into getting more leg room. So. Because the charters that we took to like the closer destinations, like Penn State wasn't that far. It would be 2 rows on one side and 1 row on the other side. So everybody would try and get that one seat on the side so that you can kick your legs out, because the legroom wasn't anything like comfortable. So we'd try and get that one seat by yourself, or you would hope that you could get 2 seats alone so you could take over those 2 seats. So anyways, I remember Nigel was a freshman, and he kept, he was never afraid to voice his opinion. And we walked to the back of the plane, and he made a joke to Coach Ryan, and his wife was sitting next to him, and he's like, come on, Coach. He's like, how can you be sitting in the back? He's like, I thought you would be first class, having a martini or something. And Coach was like, no. He's like, I'm in the back. He goes, think about it. When a plane crashes, he goes, what goes down first? He goes, the front end of the plane is going to crash first. And then Nigel started laughing. He's like, all right, well, I'm going to sit in the row in front of you then. And so Nigel sat down in the seat right in front of him after that.
That is hilarious. So it's an actually, like, he wasn't just messing with Butch. That's a real thing. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm glad you could corroborate that story. That's fantastic.
You got it.
All right, Duje, one last question before I let you go. Just want to get your thoughts on the current state of Wisconsin hoops. The Badgers obviously missed the tournament last year for the first time in a while, and they closed the season strong. They got pretty much everybody coming back and people coming back from injuries as well. So I wanted to get your thoughts on next season and beyond under Greg Gard.
Yeah, you know what? I'm excited. I think last year was a tough season because we had so many underclassmen that were kind of required to have a bigger role. And some of those guys, it was really their first time playing. And they were expected to have, big impacts when they really hadn't been through the rodeo before. So there was a lot of growing pains, a lot of frustrating times. I think injuries were a huge part of why we weren't able to be as successful as we wanted to be. But I think for next season, obviously Ethan coming back, the Davison kid as well, coming back healthy, and the rest of the team, I think it'll be very exciting to see how they grow this summer, see how the team comes together for next season, because you could definitely see flashes throughout the season with for example, when they beat Purdue on Frank's jersey retirement night. I remember talking to Brevin before the game, kind of just trying to pick his brain. I'm like, what's going on, man? Like, why are we struggling so bad? Because when you look at it, we really shouldn't have been, like, struggling as much as we were. And he was like, man, I think guys' confidence is down and stuff like that. And, kind of went into detail talking about it. I was like, all right, well, you know what? I was like, I just hope you're winning tonight. And he looked at me and smiled. He was like, all right, Duje. He's like, no, I'm telling you, like, you're going to win tonight. And I was like, just keep the game close. And I'm telling you, the fans will bring this home. I was like, you guys are not going to lose this game. And sure enough, they end up winning the game. And he looks at me after the game, points. He goes, you called it. I was like, yeah, I know. I was like, I'm telling you, these fans are something else, man. So I think, these guys are all a year older, a year mature. They've been to the Big Ten now. They've played against some good non-conference opponents. So I think they'll be ready for the calling. And I think, obviously Coach Gard, this was his first, I think, true testament with a lot of injuries and stuff like that. So I think it was a good experience for him too. So I'm excited to see what these guys have planned for us next season. Hopefully I can catch a game or two and show my support for them.
All right, Duje. Well, I can credit you with two things for sure, and that's the Bulls signing Rondo and Wisconsin beating Purdue last year. So that's good to know. And hey, man, I had a lot of fun reminiscing about your playing days with you here today. Very generous with your time. I appreciate you spending some time on the podcast, and maybe we'll get you back on again soon.
You got it, man. Would love to be back on. Thanks for having me.
Yep. All right, thanks once again to Brian and Duje for joining me. Had a ton of fun chatting with those guys. Love hearing the locker room stories and kind of the off-the-court stories of players and coaches, and then also their post-college adventures in the world of basketball. Always good catching up with guys, especially, if they haven't made the NBA or if they had a couple T in the NBA but haven't stuck. It's good to get an update on where they're at, and definitely wish Duje the best in his ongoing career and Brian the best in his ongoing coaching, media, and I guess coaching basketball camp venture as well. So great discussions with a pair of great guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I want to give one shout out, as I always do at the end of the show, to my producer Wes White, killing it as always. He's a Badger fan, so I hope he enjoyed these discussions. It's probably one he actually listened to all the way through, so thanks for that, Wes, and thanks for producing as always. Thanks to everyone out there, as always, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time here on the Take 10 podcast.